When making travel plans, here's some good news. Flight prices in South Africa are set to drop in the next few months. Airline FlySafair predicts that airfares will decrease in late January. Flight prices, if you remember, skyrocketed after Comair, operators of Kulula.com, and British Airways liquidated earlier this year. Well, let's look ahead now, discussing this with FlySafair Chief Marketing Officer Kirby Gordon, who's joining us virtually from Cape Town. Kirby, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your patience. Welcome to today here on eNCA. I guess if you look ahead, it's going to be good news for flight ticket prices in South Africa. What are the key factors that could drive that?
Dan, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the reality is that flight ticket prices are very much set on a market, and it's that old adage of supply and demand that we always speak about that is really what dictates how the prices are determined at the end of the day. And you rightly identified that obviously demand in South Africa has been on a fantastic recovery and upward trajectory in that regard as the economy gets back on its feet post-COVID. But the aviation industry, unfortunately, has had a few stumbles along the way. So traditionally, we're used to having about 1.6 million seats available on domestic networks per month. And just before COVID, just before Comair left the market, we were at a point where we had about 1.2 million seats. So that's about a three-quarter recovery. But unfortunately, with the departure of Comair from the market, what we ended up with was about 900,000 seats. Now, the good news is that between the operators that are left, we've managed to bring on enough capacity to get us back to that 1.2 million mark, which is a very positive sign. But there's still a little way to go. Fortunately, FlySafair and others have plans in place to make that happen.
What are your plans in terms of capacity?
So we estimate that out of those 400,000 seats that are missing out of the market at the moment, they could be replaced quite easily by about 11.5 aircraft of our size, of our gauge. And we have committed to adding an additional 6 aircraft to our fleet before the end of April next year. So those will be coming online every couple of weeks. Obviously, we can't bring them all out at once. And that should certainly serve to alleviate a lot of that supply pressure and in turn, ultimately bring prices down.
Yeah, and also maybe you're going to create more jobs because you'll have to employ more staff if you've got additional aircraft. I mean, it's not lots and lots of jobs, but it's jobs.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, you know, the reality is that they do add up, Dan. I mean, we this year, come this December, we'll be flying 1.5 times, in fact, slightly more than that, about 164% growth on what we did last year. And in the course of this year, we've employed directly 350 odd people, creating those jobs that weren't there before. But the reality is, obviously, we rely very heavily on a number of service providers and other partners from AXA, from air traffic navigation services, from ground handlers, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, for every one of those jobs in an aviation capacity, the theory that IATA tells us holds true, that there probably are an additional 12 jobs that are created as a result of that in the bigger economy.
Yeah, now when the prices begin to come down later on in a few months' time, with a lull in terms of demand, in terms of seasonal demand, and also the fact that you might be having more capacity, on average, let me take you back to where we started, the ticket price currently, what would the reduction likely look like? Do you have an idea?
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, I think what we can do is take a look at what we were used to in 2019 when the market was in equilibrium, right? And we had supply and demand in a healthy space where ticket prices made sense, but at the same token, they made sense for airlines to keep going, for the industry to be sustainable in the long run. And if we think about what that was, and then we consider that there will be, of course, a degree of inflation that's happened through this period. I mean, I know we all speak about it all the time, but obviously the fuel price has an impact on things in the bigger scheme of things, but just also normal general inflation since 2019. It's been 3 years now. We'll get a sense of where those prices are. It'll always be seasonal. There will always be periods where there'll be higher demand and higher prices. So, school holidays, Christmas holidays, Easter holidays, those will be periods where, we'll continue to advise folks to book in advance in order to get the better ticket prices. But come the last 2 weeks of Jan and Feb, there should certainly be a lull. And then certainly going into the winter, we predict that you'll see a lot of airlines starting to run the kinds of promotions and specials that we like.
So 2019 will be a good indicator of where the prices could be sitting at from Jan-Feb next year. Final question, and if you may be brief, you must, in your risk management planning, as you strategize, you must be bearing in mind how the impact was of the pandemic on the airline industry into the future. What is it looking? What's the outlook for you, very briefly?
Look, airlines have always been a risky business. That is the reality that we face. It's the nature of the product that we sell. We're very bullish about the future of South Africa. We think that there's a lot that we can still do in this industry. We're obviously investing very heavily into it, and so we're very positive about it.
Thank you very much for your time, as always, here on Today. That's Kirby Gordon, the Chief Marketing Officer of FlySafair. They're adding more capacity, and hopefully from late Jan next year, early February, the ticket prices could be reaching the levels, going back to the levels, the airline ticket prices going back to the levels where they used to be in 2019. So it's going to be a little bit cheaper to fly, comparatively speaking.